The hearing room was already tense, the air brittle with unspoken hostility. What had begun as a routine oversight session quickly morphed into a battleground of personalities, pride, and raw political venom. Jasmine Crockett, seated confidently behind her microphone, had no intention of being steamrolled. Her questions were sharp, her tone measured, but beneath it all was a fierce sense of duty. To truth, to representation, and to dignity. Across the room, Pam Bondi sat with her arms crossed and lips pursed. She was a seasoned legal analyst and former state attorney general, and today she seemed emboldened by something beyond law or logic. Was it frustration? Was it ego? Or was it something far more dangerous? Something rooted in resentment over seeing a black woman command the room with authority. At first, the exchange was standard political theater. Pam, condescending but composed, questioned Crockett's priorities. Crockett, undeterred, fired back with data and clarity. But as the minutes wore on, the heat intensified. Words became barbs. Statements turned into provocations. Then it happened. Pam Bondi leaned forward, her voice coated in disdain, and uttered a sentence that would set the country on fire. Maybe if you're so unhappy with America, you should just go back to Africa. The room froze. The silence was deafening. Eyebrows raised, aides shifted uncomfortably, and even the chairman's gavel hesitated in his hand. Did she really just say that? Was that a slip of the tongue or a calculated strike? And more importantly, what would Jasmine do? It was not just a racist dog whistle. It was a megaphone blaring every ugly assumption and ancient prejudice. The comment wasn't just about Jasmine. It was about every black American who had ever been told they didn't belong in their own country. Was this truly what political discourse had become? Had civility eroded so far that public officials now hurled colonial slurs with no fear of consequence? Cameras caught it all. The moment exploded online in real time. On Twitter, clips of the outburst racked up millions of views. Pundits scrambled to interpret, to condemn, to defend. But back in that room, it was still Jasmine's turn to speak. Would she shout? Would she walk out? Would she unleash fury? No. What she did next didn't just stun the committee, it stunned the nation. Jasmine Crockett did not flinch. She didn't reach for her notes or glance toward her staff. Her eyes remained fixed on Pam Bondi, not with rage, but with something far more powerful. Steady, cold, unblinking. It was the kind of stare that did not shout. It dismantled. And in that moment, Crockett knew exactly what she was going to say. She leaned forward, her fingers gently tapping the table, as if keeping time with the heartbeat of the room. "Ms. Bondi," she began, her voice calm and precise, "the idea that a black woman challenging your assumptions somehow means she's less American than you is the very reason why I sit in this chair." Gasps rippled through the room. Not dramatic gasps, just the subtle, collective breath of people realizing they were witnessing something irreversible. "You said I should go back to Africa," Crockett continued, her tone rising just a notch. "That phrase has a history. It was used to silence civil rights leaders. It was used to humiliate black soldiers returning from war. It was used to justify segregation. And now it's being used, right here, in the halls of government, by someone who once swore to uphold justice." Bondi tried to interject, but Crockett didn't give her the chance. She raised a hand, not dramatically, but with the quiet authority of someone who knew the floor was hers. "No," she said firmly. "You've spoken. Now listen." The room, once divided, now leaned collectively in her direction. Even Bondi's allies avoided her gaze, unsure how to defend what had just been said. "I was born in the United States," Crockett continued. "My ancestors built this country. They did it in chains, with blood on their backs and no names on the census. They didn't ask to come here. But they made America their home, and I am their legacy." You don't get to tell me to go back to anywhere. Pam Bondi's expression tightened. But it was clear. She had already lost control of the narrative. Crockett's voice softened. Not to concede, but to drive the knife in cleaner. And let me be crystal clear, she said. When I speak for every young girl watching. This, wondering if her skin disqualifies her from being heard. I speak for the people who never got a microphone in front of them. You tried to humiliate me in front of the world. But what you did, Ms. Bondi, is expose something ugly. Something a lot of Americans pretend isn't still alive. And you did it on camera. There was a long pause. The committee chair said nothing. Neither did the other panelists. Even the reporters in the back stopped typing. Everyone was waiting for the fallout. Then someone clapped. It started as a single clap, awkward and tentative. Then another. And another. Until a spontaneous round of applause echoed through the room, raw, unsanctioned, and utterly unscripted. Bondi's face flushed, not with shame, but with the fury of losing control. She reached for the mic. "Are you done grandstanding?" she snapped. Crockett didn't even turn her head. "I'm just getting started," she said. Outside the chamber, the nation erupted. News outlets ran the headline within minutes. Jasmine Crockett eviscerates Pam Bondi after racist slur. Hashtags surged. Support flooded in from civil rights leaders, celebrities, and voters on both sides of the aisle who knew that something deeper had just happened. It wasn't just a viral moment. It was a reckoning. But Pam Bondi wasn't done. Her pride wouldn't allow it. And what she did next would escalate things far beyond a simple insult. Pam Bondi had never been embarrassed on a national stage, until now. And it showed. The moment the hearing adjourned for recess, she bolted from her seat like a woman possessed. Her aides scrambled behind her, whispering damage control strategies she didn't want to hear. Her face, normally calculated and camera-ready, was twisted with indignation. Jasmine Crockett hadn't just fired back. She had taken control of the narrative, the room, and the nation's attention. For someone like Bondi, that loss of control was intolerable. Within an hour, she was in front of the press, flanked by carefully chosen allies, standing behind a podium that bore the seal of legitimacy she so desperately clung to. The microphones flickered. Flashbulbs burst. She stared straight into the cameras and delivered a statement she clearly believed would shift the tide back in her favor. "The comment I made," she began, "was taken out of context. I was referring to Representative Crockett's frequent criticisms of American values and institutions. My intent was never to invoke race. Was it an apology? Barely. It was a deflection wrapped in legalese, designed not to take responsibility, but to reframe the conversation away from racism and back to her favorite target, wokeness." She continued, doubling down. "What we're seeing is a calculated attempt to smear anyone who challenges radical leftist narratives. I will not be silenced." And there it was. The pivot. Victimhood wrapped in authority. The transformation of a public disgrace into a partisan grievance. But the public wasn't buying it. As her statement circulated, commentators from across the political spectrum called out the hollow deflection. Civil rights attorneys dissected her language line by line, exposing the historical weight of phrases like, "go back to Africa," reminding viewers that this wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was part of a long, documented lineage of racial exclusion. Jasmine Crockett, meanwhile, said nothing. She didn't need to. Her team issued no official comment. There was no Twitter thread, no press release. The silence wasn't passive. It was tactical. In a media ecosystem desperate for outrage, Crockett's restraint made the contrast even sharper. While Bondi ranted, Crockett strategized. While Bondi pointed fingers, Crockett built alliances. And behind the scenes, something unexpected began to stir. Dozens of lawmakers reached out to Crockett privately, some apologizing, others offering support. Staffers from both parties leaked internal messages expressing disgust at Bondi's remark. An informal coalition began to form, one that spanned gender, race, and even political affiliations. Bondi had lit a fire she could no longer contain. But what she didn't know was that Crockett had been preparing for this moment her entire life. This wasn't just about a slur. It wasn't even about politics anymore. It was about the battle between two visions of America, one that clung to power through division, and one that rose by challenging it. And the next time they met, it would no longer be confined to a hearing room. Pam Bondi, stung by the backlash and determined to reclaim the upper hand, accepted an invitation to appear on a national town hall debate, a live, televised event with no room for spin, no teleprompters, no handlers. Jasmine Crockett would be there too, and this time the entire country would be watching. The lights were blinding. The set was sleek, modern, drenched in the polished gleam of high-stakes television. Two chairs sat on opposite ends of a raised stage. Between them, a thin line of empty space that might as well have been a fault line. Pammy. Bondi entered first, heels clicking against the glossy floor, her expression tightly controlled. She wore a white suit, pure, sharp, deliberate. Every detail of her appearance was curated to project authority and innocence. She smiled briefly at the moderator, then took her seat with the rigid posture of someone ready for war. Moments later, Jasmine Crockett walked in. She wore black, not somber, commanding, a statement. No accessories, no flash, just presence. She greeted the moderator with a quiet nod, then turned to the audience with the confidence of someone who didn't need to perform. Her calm was disarming, and it unsettled Bondi before a single word had been exchanged. The moderator, sensing the weight of the moment, wasted no time. "Let's begin with what brought us here," he said, his voice level. "Ms. Bondi, you told Representative Crockett she should go back to Africa. You've since claimed the comment was taken out of context. Tonight, both of you have the opportunity to speak directly to each other and to the nation." Bondi leaned forward, her voice steady but defensive. "I have always defended this country," she said, "and I will never apologize for challenging people who tear it down. My words were harsh, but my point stands. If someone continuously criticizes America, perhaps they should consider what it is they want from it." She paused, clearly expecting a ripple of agreement. Instead, the room sat in still silence, waiting. Crockett didn't move for a full 3 seconds. Then she spoke. "You see," she said quietly, "this is the problem. You think patriotism means silence. You think criticism is betrayal. But America wasn't built by the silent. It was built by people who demanded better, who knew this country could live up to its promise, even when it failed them." She turned toward Bondi. "I love this country enough to hold it accountable." "That's not disloyalty. That's leadership," Bondi interrupted, her voice rising. "And what about respect? What about unity? You call yourself a leader, but all you do is divide people into oppressors and victims." The audience shifted, sensing the friction sharpen. "I divide nothing," Crockett shot back. "I reveal what's already there. You don't like the mirror, so you blame the reflection. But let's be clear. You didn't tell me to debate better. You didn't ask for evidence. You told me to leave. Because in your mind, someone like me isn't part of the American fabric." Bondi's jaw tightened. "I never said that." Crockett didn't blink. "You didn't have to." A hush fell over the studio. The moderator, visibly tense, interjected, with a question for both. "What does reconciliation look like, if the wounds are still this raw?" Crockett looked out toward the audience, then directly into the camera. "It starts when people stop pretending the past is behind us," she said. "It starts when power doesn't get to define pain. And it starts when people like Pam Bondi stop treating accountability like an attack." Bondi opened her mouth to respond, but the audience, previously silent, had already begun clapping. It was not wild or theatrical. It was slow, deliberate, building in momentum. People were not applauding a takedown. They were applauding a truth that had been buried for far too long. And somewhere in the back row, a young black girl watched with wide eyes. She didn't know policy. She didn't care about ratings. But in Jasmine Crockett, she saw something she had never seen before. Someone who looked like her, commanding a room without apology. Bondi saw it too, and for the first time, the fire in her eyes dimmed. Not from defeat, but from recognition. Not because she agreed, but because she realized. This was no longer about a comment. It was about a shift in who gets to define America. But it wasn't over. The final moment, unrehearsed, unexpected, would bring everything to a head. Not with more words, but with a gesture that no one saw coming. The applause faded, but something deeper lingered in the silence that followed. The room wasn't just quiet. It was reflective. There was a heaviness to the air, not from tension, but from collective recognition. Everyone had heard the words. Everyone had seen the contrast. But what no one expected, what no one could predict, was what came next. The moderator began to wrap up the segment. "Final thoughts," he said, looking first to Pam Bondi. "This is your opportunity to speak not just to Representative Crockett, but to the country." Bondi hesitated. The Pam Bondi from 2 days ago would have doubled down, would have blamed the press, would have clung to talking points like a lifeline. But now, under the weight of Crockett's unflinching composure, she seemed different. Not humbled, perhaps, but cornered by truth. And when she finally spoke, her voice didn't bark. It wavered. "I've served this country in law, in public service, in advocacy," she said slowly, "and I've always believed in standing firm. But I also believe in something else, something harder. Listening." She looked across the stage, not with venom, but with something closer to discomfort. The type that comes from realizing the floor has shifted beneath your feet. "To Representative Crockett," she said, pausing, "you don't need my validation, and maybe you never did. But I hear you. I may not agree with everything you say, but I can't ignore the pain in your words." There were no gasps, no cheers, just stillness. Crockett didn't smile. She didn't nod. She just listened. Exactly what she had asked Bondi to do from the beginning. And then it happened. Bondi stood. She walked across the stage, slowly, almost cautiously, and stopped just feet from Crockett's chair. For a moment it looked like the beginning of another confrontation. But then she extended her hand. The audience froze. Crockett didn't rise right away. She stared at the hand, skeptical. Had this woman who had tried to humiliate her in public truly changed her mind? Or was this another performance, another tactic to soften the backlash? But Crockett understood something. Leadership was not always about reacting. Sometimes it was about setting the example others refused to. She stood, and she shook Pam Bondi's hand. The crowd erupted, not with political loyalty, not with party allegiance, but with the raw relief of witnessing something America rarely offers anymore. Resolution, not forgiveness, not forgetting, but something even more radical in this age of outrage: mutual recognition. It became the image that would headline every outlet across the country. Two women. One moment. A nation watching. Not because the insult had been erased, but because the response had transcended it. In the days that followed, the moment sparked a wider movement. Town halls emerged across states. Schools began hosting forums on racial justice and political accountability. Members of Congress who rarely shared airspace started sitting down not to debate talking points, but to listen. And Jasmine Crockett? She didn't seek to capitalize. She didn't posture for the next campaign. She returned to work, focused, unfazed, and more determined than ever. Because she knew the truth. Moments pass, but movements do not. As for Pam Bondi, she didn't vanish. But she became quieter. Not silenced, reflective. She had touched a nerve, and in doing so, forced herself to confront what she had long ignored. Whether she would ever truly change was unknown. But the moment had left its mark. On her. On Crockett. On the nation. Because America had just been reminded of something it had nearly forgotten. Dignity speaks louder than hate. And when courage meets restraint, even the ugliest slurs can be disarmed, not with vengeance, but with truth.